So anyway, front matter slide. This is what I just asked you to enter into the chat. What are those ways that your organization had to change services? And what we're going to talk about today along those lines is something called the Open Project. This is a developing way of organizing data for nonprofits. Continuity of operations is really a big project management tool. And this is one that they are developing. It is on the FEMA website. I have digested their material into a great big template with a lot more information. You all should have received that already. And I think Anna was going to drop that into the chat again. For people. You don't have to print it today. I hope it's mostly self-explanatory because we only have 2 hours today, and I usually spend 4 hours walking people through that template and doing projects, and we're going to skip that part for the most part today. So, excuse me. What project or activities we're going to do today? I want to do some work with disaster communications and how to create actionable, clear, pertinent and timely information during a disaster, and talk about how to develop memorandums of understanding. I was at a conference on Monday and Tuesday, and one of the things that we were asked, it was like media training, and one of the things we were asked was to stop using the word memorandum of understanding, like just use agreement or partnership. That would be just fine. I spent a lot of that talk while that person was giving their plenary, taking all the things they were saying and translating it back into the disaster language that I know. And so one of my takeaways from that is that I really need to get out of my own head if I'm going to explain this to people who aren't already immersed in it. That wasn't too fun, but it's so important. And thank you all for being here. If I use acronyms, you can either put it in the chat or you can go off mute and say, what the heck are you talking about? I'm honestly not sure what happened to my chat box at this point. My screens are not doing what I expected them to do this morning. And lastly, we're going to talk about staff training because there's writing out these plans and figuring out what are we going to do in a disaster or following a disaster. But ultimately, if we don't cross-train our staff to do other jobs and other activities, we're not going to be effective at response or in that early recovery stage because not everybody is going to be available to do their usual job. And we need to be able to fill in, and we need to be able to do some of that specialty work. This is my housekeeping. Show of hands, has anybody not been on Zoom before? Yeah. So we'll just skip that. I will plug about that later. I became a disaster nerd back in 2012 when I started volunteering for the Red Cross. And in 2019, I decided I didn't have the bandwidth or the emotional capacity to be a disaster responder anymore. And so now I do this work and help people prepare for the most part, which doesn't mean I'm not involved in the San Francisco VOAD in a capacity that might get me doing response work if something got big enough. And I have a fancy certification for doing this work. That's what Associate Business Continuity Professional means. It was very interesting to take that training. It was a week-long training, and great big international companies do this work. And none of them could really quite figure out what, my scrappy little nonprofit self was doing in there, learning this stuff to translate it to other scrappy little nonprofits. So, and then my organization, SF Card, we've been around a long time and we've been supporting nonprofits for a long time. And a shout out to our funder. We call this the UASI, Urban Area Security Initiative. It's Homeland Security money. FEMA is under Homeland Security. This is part of sub-training, like their training and exercise. We do these annually. We're on our 4th year of doing these trainings, which is really fantastic. They're one of the very first to realize and start setting aside, dedicating some of this funding, not just to law enforcement, emergency managers, and fire departments, but making sure that we have a whole community approach, actually training the whole community. And in fact, last year, FEMA realized that this was a really good idea. And they've actually asked all the UASIs and made it part of funding that all community, all of the funding needs to have some amount dedicated to the community. I may have completely bottled that sentence. So I'm going to have a drink of water and let Anna talk about Thrive Rise for a second.
Hi, everyone. I'll be brief. My name is Anna Mascolta, and I am the Director of Community Resilience for Thrive Alliance, and I lead the COAD for San Mateo County. This COAD, which named Thrive Rise, is relatively new. We launched it last year, even though the San Mateo County used to have a COAD also under Thrive, but it hadn't been active for a long time. So we're still relatively new, developing relationships in this sector, but Thrive itself is quite established. And I think the reason that the COAD became such a good fit for us was because we were already doing much of this work during COVID, and that really was our work, to be supporting nonprofits through a different type of disaster than what we might have been used to. So this is our first full year, and we've been really thankful for the support from SF CARD and UASI to be able to organize these trainings for San Mateo County nonprofits. So go ahead, and I'm going to leave my email in the chat. Go ahead and reach out if you have any questions or you'd like to connect with us, and I'll pass it back to Heather.
Thanks. I just realized I was on the wrong screen that whole time. So I have somewhere lost my chat buried across two screens. I have not had a chance what I was going to, which was look at your responses in chat. So somebody's going to have to come off mute and talk besides me here. I would like an example of what your nonprofit did during the winter storms. That's like our most recent long going disaster. Something that was particularly challenging or maybe particularly satisfying to solve, and anything perhaps that led to some long-term change in your organization. And I will start calling on people if somebody doesn't decide to talk for me.
Heather, this is Dina.
Hi, Dina.
Hi. I'll jump in and go first, because we utilized nonprofits, if you would, and our CERT groups during the winter storms, and certainly during COVID as well. So I'm Dina Gunning. I'm the Community Risk and Resiliency Specialist for the Central County Fire Department. I'm also our CERT Community Emergency Response Team Program Manager for Burlingame, Hillsborough, and Millbrae. Those are the jurisdictions that we serve. And this was our first year. We just started our standard operating procedures and an official umbrella over the 3 jurisdictions as all affiliated CERT programs, and working in collaboration with our neighborhood networks. So our Burlingame Neighborhood Network and our Hillsborough Neighborhood Network stepped in to help us actually monitor the sandbag stations when we had the winter storms, and we had a lot of contractors that were stopping by and helping themselves. And we're taking the majority of the sand. So we needed to start monitoring that. And we did that. We had, I think, 12 volunteers in Burlingame, and I think we had at least 1 or 2 in Hillsborough that stepped up and helped did that. So that was fantastic. And it's just so heartfelt for me to have Thrive back and have Anna on board as their Director of Community Resilience. The last time that Thrive stepped in to assist in this way was back during the pipeline explosions, San Bruno, back in 2010. So I'm so glad that you guys are finally rejuvenated. You have a seat at the Department of Emergency Management now. And you guys did an amazing job getting public information out during the storms as well. So Anna, you guys have kudos for that, because that really is vital to all of us, and that helps us with consistent messaging. And Anna, I have something to share with you too at some point, because we're really getting together now with DEM now that they've built staff up and whatnot. And Rick Reed, one of our new emergency services coordinator with DEM, is a PIO and a former director of emergency management for Santa Clara. So we're very fortunate. I think that's going to really help us out a lot moving forward. So that was it for us. Thank you so much. And yeah, like most others in the chat, the adjustment to working at home, running a virtual operations center from home for probably about 3 or 4 months until we got back into the stations and whatnot. So yeah, glad that that's finally over. And now we have to work on the after action reports, right?
Oh, God, yes, then there's that.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Heather.
thanks, Dina.
Thanks, Anna.
Jennifer, make sure there you go.
Yeah, just wanted to share something that Nuestra Casa provides. I do the environmental justice, our department, but we also have food recovery that we provide to our community, which we serve our South San Mateo County. So, East Palo Alto, Bellhaven, North Fair Oaks, and Redwood City. We really saw during these disasters an uptick of community members needing food with the flooding, and then also with a lot of issues with power going out for long periods of time. We saw that community members, we saw a lot more community members, and thankful that we were able to serve a lot more community members through our food recovery program. And I think it's just a reminder for us too that, we try to remove any barriers when it comes to providing those types of resources, because we don't really ask much from our community, and anyone is welcome to come even outside of our county. So we really did see an increase of that need during these disasters. So that's something definitely we're thinking in the future, how we can be more of a center there when people are coming already for assistance. How can we provide more information, right? Learning for them to learn more about, like, is this a FEMA disaster? Here's more information. I was even thinking, like, maybe we could pick up some sandbags and bring them to that location so people can just pick some up there. So we're really trying to think of how we can use those food recovery distribution centers as way to even provide maybe like emergency food, like canned food goods to have in the future. So we're really trying to mull that over, and really thankful for Thrive to allow the space for us to kind of grow and be more proactive instead of reactive when it comes to disasters.
That's awesome. That is exactly what continuity of operations is about. At its heart, it is taking the lessons learned and trying to institutionalize them as quickly as possible before we've moved on to the next disaster, regular Tuesday, something to kind of hold in the back of your head a little later. We're going to talk about, we're going to do some exercises around disaster communication and around memorandums of understanding. Dina gave a great example of a place where you can start building memorandums of understanding so that those partners can help again in the future. And then for Nuestra Casa, I just choked on that one, Nuestra Casa, improving those communications, and then even, making sure that you're getting the best information as timely as possible so that you can spread it out from those sites. So that's some starter ideas for when we do the exercise. Does anybody else want to share?
Yeah, my name is Thomas. I'm the Director of Operations for the Living Room Women's Center. We didn't actually have the ability to do anything during the winter storms. Besides, we provided some extra tents and ponchos and things like that. If you're not familiar with our organization, we help women and women with children in Santa Rosa, Sonoma County area. And we have a drop-in center that we just opened a year ago, so women can come and get fed and warm, use their computer lab resources. But the biggest shift that we did is in COVID, we used to have our drop-in center at our current location, and we had to shut all services, in-person services, down. So we made a huge shift into a transitional housing program and started moving our offices to other locations and putting women in our transitional housing program. On top of that, we decided to take our food program, which was coming to our facility to get fed, and shifting that into a food delivery system, making hot meals available And currently we do about 1,000 meals a week that we deliver out to other organizations currently.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, it's been pretty cool.
Yeah, I had not heard of your organization. So one of my favorite things about this job is I get to meet people as they're coming into the disaster world, and for information. And so I get to meet so many people and learn about all the amazing things that are happening all over the Bay Area.
It is really cool. This is my first class out of because you mentioned in the beginning, this is the third of 4. And I recently, I think about 2 weeks ago, went to a COAD disaster preparedness class here in Santa Rosa, is where I got the newsletter to connect with this. And our long-term goal is we're actually looking to become a disaster preparedness site, kind of maybe a command center or something like that, and be able to operate during a disaster to feed first responders, people that need to, with our commercial kitchen. We're currently looking at a solar system backup battery with a potential generator to continue to run during a disaster.
You should connect with me afterwards. For
Okay.
starters, Tuesday at 10, I'm doing another online class. Somebody's cell phone is ringing in my other ear. Sorry, I'm highly distracted by little bingling noises. Tuesday at 10, I'll talk about this at the end, but Tuesday at 10, I'm doing an incident command training.
Okay.
So you'll want to be there. And I also have a connection. I don't know if you can tap into their program, but I have somebody who does Interfaith Power and Light. They're working on it with the EPA on solar panels and battery backups.
I would love to connect on that.
So yeah, I don't know if you can get into their particular program, but at the very least, I can connect you and they can tell you their lessons learned and suggestions for where to find that.
Yeah. Well, and if you don't ask, you don't know. So
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
perfect.
Other thing that I do here, I connect people. So thank you all. We're going to move along a bit because all the things that I want to do. So connecting people, that's one of my jobs. Please don't try to read this screen. The other big part of my job is translating government language into real life. The entirety of that nonsense, and I admit I put this here because it entertains me every time. I had to read this about 15 times, and I have philosophy and theology and reading big, dense, complicated, books. It took me forever to figure out exactly what they thought they were saying in this, definitely built by committee. All this says is we need to do things during a disaster, even though there's a disaster happening. So again, if you get bored or you want to do a mental exercise, I'll give you my slides and you can try and parse that out. It's absolutely crazy. That's also one of the reasons that I've taken this really great idea, this open program, or it's a project management tool that I've taken that. I worked with one of the VOADs, is my bounced a lot of stuff off her, and came up with as close to a template for this kind of work as we can get. Everybody always wants something that they can fill in, like, let me just fill in the adjectives and the verbs and some numbers, and then magically I have continuity of operation plan. And I'm sorry right now at 10:22 in the morning to disabuse you. It doesn't work like that. All of our organizations are doing very particular things. We have very particular clients, very particular activities, very particular ways that our buildings are laid out, and how we manage our work from home. And we have to encapsulate those policies, procedures, programs, et cetera, and then figure out if part of it's disrupted, what might we do instead? And so it's a lot of, sloggy work. Slog was my word this morning. I may use it again. So ultimately, the purpose of continuity of operations planning is to keep people safe and to continue to deliver services, and to survive the loss of income or information or goodwill. And that comes out of the technical for businesses stuff, but it's also true with nonprofits. Sometimes in our disaster response, somebody will be disgruntled, somebody will put it on TikTok or talk to the media about it. And then we find ourselves with a PR problem, even though we're doing the best that we can with what we have available to us. And so that's also a little bit about disaster communications, is thinking about how do we frame what's happening in a way that people can understand, like, again, still actionable, useful information, and clarifying. Disasters exacerbate how fast rumors fly. And as you all know, rumors fly pretty fast. I also just got out of 2 days of comms training, so I might have lots of technical words thrown in there that I don't even remember I'm doing. My apologies on that. While you are doing this planning, I'm going over this really fast. This is all in that very big document that you got sent in advance that you may or may not have printed out. But I want you to know that, after saying all that, and it's all going to be like, you have to figure out all of this stuff. You've already figured out a lot of this stuff. It already exists in places like any planning you may have already done. You're going to find a bunch of information that's in your staff handbook, like in your onboarding procedures, in your policies, your HR policies, how you manage your finances, your insurance company has something to say about it. You're going to find a lot of the information already there for what you need to know. And then you also have at your disposal things like FEMA or Cal OES, your local emergency management. The web has so much information on it. RISE, you can always reach out if you have questions to Anna. And if Anna can't help you, I'm pretty sure she will pass you on to me. If you are in an organization, I'm going to pick on Rebuilding Together today. I don't think anybody from Rebuilding Together is here. Rebuilding Together has, local offices, but they also have a national umbrella organization. A lot of us have that. And so that information, the information we need may actually exist just higher at a higher level that we can put into our localized plans. You can also reach out if you are doing food distribution. You can also reach out to another organization that does food distribution. One of the nice things about nonprofits is we all tend to share a lot of information with each other and fairly generously. And particularly in disaster, nobody wants to invent the wheel because it always feels like we're inventing the wheel. And so if you reach out, if you've pivoted, for example, to food delivery,
Awesome.
I don't know. Oh, there we go. Sorry. You could reach out to Meals on Wheels and say, hey, how do you do this? And they'll give you best practices because ultimately we all want people to be fed. And then consulting firms, and that's, I already mentioned, you could, send that, send any questions you have to me. We try to do this as inexpensively as possible. This is why we seek out grants to cover as much, especially these kind of more introductory trainings, is so that we can use that to help offset that individual consulting. And we're always willing to, I am always willing, if you just have a quick question and shoot me an email, I'll always give you the best answer I can or connect you with somebody else who can help you. So this is the open project. There's a little link on there. Like I said, you have that great big thing. This, like any other, and I have several methodologies at my disposal for how to do this. And it's because really all this is project management. It is just yet another project or program management tool for how to organize data and then effectively move through a process. The difference between this one and anything you already use is it has disaster-y words in it because that's its particular topic. But if you already know how to organize a program, you already know basically how to do this work. It's just figuring out what information do I need? What are the parts? Where are we? So this is what open is. Organizations preparing for emergency needs. They've got we all do this. Everyone I've seen, there's a whole bunch of bullet points. I took the bullet points and I clustered them into topics that kind of can lead you through a process for the first time. And after that, it's just iterative maintenance. But before you start this, one of the ways we talk about this is a disaster mission statement. But before you start figuring out how you're going to respond or pivot your work in a disaster or post-disaster environment, you need to have a really clear idea of who you serve, like what's your purpose, and then what are those activities that you have to do, and focus on those. I have seen organizations, we've worked with organizations who their core mission is housing, and then they sat down working on their disaster mission statement and decided that during a disaster and that immediate aftermath of a disaster, what they wanted to provide to the community was counseling. But they don't have any counselors. They don't do counseling. They don't know counselors. Figure out what you actually do and do well, and focus on that, and figure out what that thing is that people are going to need the most. People need to eat right after. People need shelter right after. And people are going to look to your organization for the things they already know you provide, and you'll be able to provide it. And then another one, we're not going to talk about this. We talked about this last month. We talked about risks and hazards. I like to say, and climate change is making me want to, knock my knuckles on a piece of wood about this one. I like to say that there is a risk of tsunamis in the Bay Area, but that risk is very small. Again, I'm knocking, I can't help it. I never thought we would have anything called a bomb cyclone that could blow a semi nearly off of the Bay Bridge either, but here we are. But still, we have limited resources, limited time, and limited attention. So picking those risks that are more likely, or that we've seen recently, and planning for those activities, planning the activities around that is good. We haven't seen an earthquake in a while. Again, Dina can knock on wood for me on this one. But earthquakes is one of those things where we get the little shakes all the time, and we don't think much about it. And then every once in a blue moon, we have a really big earthquake somewhere in the Bay Area. And so even though that doesn't seem as pertinent as, say, flooding or wildfires or power outages, because those seem to be our most frequent roll of the dice in the last few years, think about earthquakes, because sometimes that risk, it isn't so much about how often it happens, but how big it is when it does happen. So those kinds of things. Like I said, I give you my template, and there's lots more words than even coming out of my mouth now about this that will help you organize, why are we doing this and what is the purpose? And having that thing like that mission statement that says, okay, this is who we are, this is what we do, this is what we can plan for, lets you find all this other information and focus it, because otherwise this can turn into a big crazy grab bag of just information that isn't focused. And the whole point of this is to try to do, this is how I describe incident command system. But after a disaster, the whole goal is to start putting some order into that chaos. And that is what recovery really is bringing that order from chaos. So the second of three, where I've clustered these bullet points out of this program. Communications, we're going to actually do an exercise on that one here real soon. These are their words, not mine too. Consider the supply chain. One of the things that I think we all discovered is many of us didn't think we really had a supply chain, because I'm not delivering food, so I don't need to figure out where food comes from. Or even, in our personal lives, we don't really think about this. But I just want to lift up the example of toilet paper in March of 2020. We are all experiencing and continue to experience supply chain hiccups and issues. And thinking about what those particularly things that we need for our clients for our main core mission, and what are possible alternate sources for that. Or, if there's a possibility or a need to consider stockpiling it, Be careful stockpiling toilet paper, particularly now that we have all these floods, because it's not useful once it gets wet. Mitigating risk is another one of these that we talked about at the last session. And that's, again, what are those hazards? How likely are they? Is this something that we want to or need to plan for right now? And then critical information. You can take whole classes that I don't teach on securing data in this brave new world of everything is online. And if anything we didn't have on the cloud 3 years ago is on the cloud now, and making sure that that information is safe. A lot of our nonprofits work with information that could be, or maybe is subject to the HIPAA compliance. There's also just the fact that we're working with people who are perhaps in a vulnerable position in one way or another. And do we really want their information to get out? One thing that I have to talk a lot about at the state level with emergency management at the state is to be careful when contacting or sharing information about seniors. I'm getting just old enough to realize this is true. We get, it turns out, more trusting as we age. And so when someone calls us on the phone and offers us something for the low price of your credit card number and the little 3 numbers on the back, we may be inclined to do that. So we need to be really careful with that contact information and personal information. And not specific, it's part of setting up systems, I think, or maybe about plans. I'll move to the next one because possibly this is formalizing plans. The other activity we're going to do today is talk about how to put together memorandums of understanding. This is, again, back to that supply chain issue. If we have material needs or facility needs, that might be just, and they might be disrupted. What are some backups we can have? Who can we talk to about that backup information? How can we pre-plan coordinating activities? Like for Nuestra Casa, they may want to figure out how to connect with Dina in advance and keep a relationship open, because that's a lot what this is, so that they're in front of getting sandbags and making sandbags available on site. Because the worst thing about a sandbag is getting one after you don't need it anymore. The other things in here about keeping this going, because up to right this minute, all you've done is made a really big document. You can print it out, put it in a red binder, and I have seen those red binders, and they're almost always red. I have seen all of this stuff put in a red binder, and then it's somewhere safe because it has critical and confidential information in it. And so it's locked in somebody's office. I've seen them used to prop open doors. Oftentimes people have no idea it exists. So one of the I'll call it a service that I offer is if you put this information together and you want to stash it somewhere where somebody could find it again in the future, I'm happy to stick it in my hard drive for you. I have had people call SF Card to contract with us to help build out continuity of operation plan or emergency response plans, and not realize that they have already done this in years past and that we have a copy of their old one that they had built before. That is one of the wonders of staff changing. And one of the reasons that we need to institutionalize this information, not just in the disaster nerd's head, but in the heart and life of the organization. Another thing on keeping this work alive is making sure, this says cross-training key individuals. It's not enough to figure out what it is that you're going to do and then assign, this is the person who's in charge, this is the person who runs this. Even assigning it to a job title and training for it. You don't know who's going to be on vacation when a disaster happens, because we wouldn't call it a disaster if we could schedule it. And so making sure that we have people who can step into those roles and positions and that authority. in the immediate aftermath is very important. And part of what makes this a living, breathing document and actually functional in your organization is making sure that that training happens. And later on, I will give you some places to look. One of the things that you'll all get, if you haven't already, is I'm going to add you to my SF Card newsletter, which I have the UASI trainings and some other trainings. It only comes out once a month. Please just unsubscribe if it is not interesting to you, or forward it to somebody else who it might be interesting for. But I found that it's easier to just add people and let them unsubscribe. Also, my platform, if you don't open that email for 2 months in a row, it just kicks you off anyway. That was, I don't know. I get a lot of information and I get overwhelmed by it, and I try not to do the same to other people. The last thing is testing and updating. That's that cycle. I'm going to use a really simple example for this. If you only ever talk about doing a fire drill, but you never actually get up and try exiting from a different door of the facility, you will never actually know where that is. During a disaster, the front of our brain shuts down and we just go off of really rote memory and the stuff that we really know well. So practicing things is what makes those lessons stick. When this works the way it's supposed to, the way we all hope it does, when there is a disaster that we start responding to, we are operating off of the lessons that we have already learned from previous disasters, and we're not making it up and the added stress of making it up and reinventing the wheel every time. So again, all of this stuff is highly detailed. I sent you, and there's a bunch of appendices in that document. Most of the heart of that document is its appendices. If you have questions about it, please reach out and ask me, and I'll go over any particular part of it that you want to. But again, I wanted to do some actual work today, and we only have a couple of hours. So we are going to roll right into an activity. I've lost Anna. She turned off her camera. I think what we'll do, let me see if I can find, I can't find my panel, Anna. It's buried underneath my slides. Are you
looking for the document?
Can you make sure that put the document in the chat for anybody who doesn't have it? I want to leave this slide up because I want to talk about disaster communications first, but then can you make like, how many people are here? Make 2 or 3 breakout rooms. I'll let you do the math on that. So people can do practice together, because we're going to do twice. And I think totally random, just randomly assigning would be fine. It's a pretty small group, and this isn't really crazy difficult thing. I need to make sure that everybody's in the same, in the same field or anything on. So.
Okay. Let me know when you want to do the breakout. I think you want to do an introduction first.
Yeah, I need to do an introduction and talk about it first, but, okay, where did this go? And then, so we're going to do this exercise. We're going to talk about it, and we're going to take a break. And when you take a break, I'm going to figure out what happened with my screens, because all of my Zoom stuff is buried. I'm not sure where it went. The bar should be somewhere and I can't find it somehow. Usually it's on top of everything and driving me crazy, but somehow I've magically made it disappear. So back to our regularly scheduled programming, disaster communication planning. The difficult thing about disasters is every disaster is its own unique thing. But all the same, the kinds of communication that we need to put out tend to be quite similar. People need to know where to go or where not to go. They need to know it in a timely manner, and they may need to know where to find more information, but they often don't need all of that information up front. Especially, for example, if you want somebody to evacuate, don't give them all the information about the flooding. You can add a little link in your communication about it, but you want to tell people like you need to evacuate now, go in whichever direction. I would love to find a way to make those notices make more sense, because you absolutely have to know exactly where all those streets are when they describe it, but I have no idea how to fix that. But as for this is kind of breaking down, who we are communicating with in part determines our message. And in the aftermath, the immediate, and then, weeks, sometimes months after a large disaster, how we connect with staff may change. Letting, at its most basic, we all had to do this with COVID. We had to find a way to tell staff, don't come in the office anymore. And then how are we going to figure out how you're now a work from home worker when you are working on a desktop that's connected to a local network and we have nothing on the cloud? Like, a lot of us went through this process. Being able to let people know that they need to come in or they don't need to come in. How do they let us know they can't? Again, training key individuals with more information so they can fill in for each other. Another way we need to communicate is with first responders. Tuesday, with a lot more information in depth, I'll talk about incident command, which is how first responders organize their disaster response. They've been doing this as continuous process improvement for at least as long as I've been alive. And they've got, it's very effective at this point. It's kind of how we do it anyway in my day-to-day in our office, partly because this is our business and it helps us to practice it, but it can be a useful way. And knowing that can be useful. And I don't teach exactly how firefighters do it because we are not firefighters, but we need to be able to convey, when, for instance, when fire shows up at our facility, we need to be able to convey things like the quirky bits of our building, or who might be missing or who is wounded. That life and safety is really how we most often connect with first responders. We need to, and as much as we can pre-think it, particularly if we need to communicate in multiple languages, how we're going to connect with clients. Do we need to redirect them? How is it? Think about this in advance helps a lot. If we usually have them come into our facility and now we want to deliver food to them, how do we convey to them, don't come to the facility anymore? And how do we find out who wants us to come to their home? And then lastly, we connect with the media. Some of us have media reach out to us. Reporters will come to us and ask for information. We will put information on social media. That's often one of the ways that we are sharing with clients or with the general public or with funders. All of these are our constituents in one way or the other. We'll talk a little bit more in ICS, in disaster command. There is something called the public information officer. That is something that you can go and get a degree in and have a full-time job in as an emergency manager. But I won't teach you that part. I will teach you how you can use those same principles in your communication now. And again, is it easy to understand? Is it actionable information? Those basic things. So Tuesday at 10, and then also in the next 5 minutes. So this is my real basic on a public information officer: honest and accurate, actionable, consistent messaging, calm. If you're conveying things with lots of anxious adjectives, you will get a lot of anxious people. Mass notification systems are useful, but you have to use them somewhat, but not overly frequently. I receive notices from lots of counties because I do this work all around the Bay Area, and some counties bombard my phone and I want to mute the emergency notifications. And some of them, I'm watching a rolling disaster out my window and I'm not getting an emergency notice from them. So that comes and goes. Some organizations use internal mass notification systems. Slack is one of those things. But it's something you want to practice. You don't want to create this is the system we use for disaster communication that we never use any other time, because everybody will take that app off their phone because they won't remember why it's on there, and then not useful. A really good trick I heard once was somebody used that for, like, they have like all hands meetings every month. And that's the system they use to announce the all hands meeting, because everyone's expecting it. And then that's how they test it, basically. So that was an interesting trick. For this activity, I'm going to split you in a couple of groups and let you practice putting together disaster communication. So you all should have gotten, it turns out it's 4 pages because there's a lot of room to write on it. So this is a real basic template. You could use this for any of your communications. Some of the feedback I get from this is they would like me to give them the information and let them basically turn it backwards into a fill in the blank. I haven't done that yet because I don't know if I don't know how useful it would be. So I do have, however, a sample event that you are free to use the sample event because it has specific, those specific details. But one of the things on this, I'm doing a terrible job of explaining this. Some days are better than others for me on Zoom. You will want to know who your organization is and convey that clearly. People will need to know where the information is coming from. Who is the contact person for your continuity of operations plan somewhere. You need to have all of those, like the login and password information for all of those ways that you communicate. That's part of cross-training individuals and staff members. If your key communication is through Facebook and only one person has access to the Facebook account, and it turns out they're not available during a disaster and you need to get information out, somebody else needs to be able to pick up the Facebook account. So having that information somewhere. And then when you're developing that Facebook post or that email, you get to choose in this, and it's not just one size fits all. How you would communicate on Twitter is different from how you would create a flyer, which is different from how you would send out a text. So you're going to want to think about, that's on the last page, but you're going to want to think about, how you're sending that information as well when you develop the messaging. But you want to know who it's for, because you might need to tell people that the facility is closed, but how you convey that information to staff is going to be different than how you convey that information to clients. They'll need to know different information. So being really clear up front, who are we talking to, can limit confusion. And you should always have an actionable item. There should be something to do with it. If all you have is information, like this is the terror for me of the 24-hour news channel. There isn't anything to actually do. So it almost feels like speculating. As of right now, we know that 35 people have been affected. There's nothing for an individual to do about that information except for ruminate, panic, and wonder if they're next. So if you're at a point where you don't have shareable, what you want to share isn't something someone can do, think twice about if it's time to share that. If you know there's a shelter opening, but nobody knows where the shelter is yet, telling people that a shelter is opening and will get back to you is less useful than to say, this is the address of the shelter that you can go to. And again, the most pertinent details. And if you have too many pertinent details, putting a little link in there or something could be fine. A lot of us really are on our phones and can easily click a link to more information. Depending on, this is also about your vehicle. If you're sending something on Twitter, you've only got, no one uses Twitter anymore, but it's still in my notes. But if you're sending something, a very small text message, you need to keep that small and readable. One thing I have seen is that if you send a big enough text message and it gets down there and it says read more and you have to click on it, people won't click read more. They'll only read what they can see. So make sure that you're delivering information in the size appropriate to your vehicle. An email can hold more information in it. A flyer can hold more information in it, can hold visual information that's harder to do in an email. So things to think about. And then again, making sure you have your platform. A really important thing is before you hit send on any information is making sure that it is accurate. I went to a conference that had one of these disaster messaging systems. And during the lunch break, they just showed us like the blooper reel of really important life-saving information that went out. But it was like, you need to shelter now. But then they had to send right back, oh, that was the wrong address. The shelter's actually at this other place. The problem with that is when people get something and they start to act on it, they may not go back to check and see, hey, am I acting on the correct information? So we need to be upfront about that. You should always know the expiration date of your information. And if you can, say when your next update will be. If you can say, we will be updating, this is a kind of like the presser thing that happens after a disaster. If you can say, we're going to send you an update at 11 o'clock every morning, just so you know, then do that. If you don't have actionable information at 11 o'clock, send something that says we don't have actionable information now, but keeps that open, keeps people remembering to check, and make sure that you are updating information that's no longer accurate. So if the shelter, I'm sorry, I'm using sheltering for this, and I don't think anyone's running a shelter here, but when a shelter closes, when sandbags are no longer available, being able to say they're no longer available saves somebody a drive. Have what we call a primary author. If too many voices are involved in the writing of the thing and the pulling the information together, it will be harder to read. That's more, if you have a bigger thing like an email, then say something tiny like a text. But having a primary author voice helps. And I know a lot of the government translation for really immediate information is relying on Google Translate to translate it into other languages. This is a big bear. I'm very grouchy about this. If you can, particularly since your sharing information is not quite the same as, evacuate right now. But you're going to be sharing most likely really important information. For example, with all the flooding in Monterey, people needed to understand how to apply for FEMA aid. That became a thing. And relying on Google Translate isn't going to give your clients and the people in your community that real they may not get the correct information. We spent some time at the conference I was at talking about how when you translate something with Google Translate and you don't speak the language and you don't even ask anybody to read that and double check, you could be sending somebody to, this was a real example, instead of sending them to evacuate, you're sending them to the laundromat. I don't know how Google Translate got to that, but I believe that it did. So what we're going to do is I'm going to give you guys about 15 minutes in a breakout room to come up with a communication. So what I will want you to report out is what your platform that you were planning to use is. Are you writing an email? Are you writing a text? If you want to, and you want to show it on your screen, do you want to, are you designing a flyer? Or, something that posts on the door. So when we come back, and we're just going to let's just do 2 groups, Anna. So what was your platform that you were doing? And then tell us your communication, and then we can talk about the specifics on it. So
Heather, can we clarify whether each group is going to be pretending to be part of the same organization, the same type of organization?
On the front of this exercise, hopefully at least one person in each group will have printed it out. There's a sample event. Unless somebody, if somebody wants to use, and this happens, if somebody wants to use an event, a real life event that they had, maybe they did maybe they put together communications, it was really bad, they want to do over. I want people to be able to use their own. Otherwise, the front of this has a small fire in the lobby of your main distribution site. I have where the fire was, when it started, what day it was, when the fire department was called, when the fire was extinguished. It's like, it's a lot of information. And then I want you to figure out who, if you're using this example, I want you to figure out who is your audience and how are you conveying that information? And then from all of that information, what do you need to actually share? So, I mean, it goes on, it talks about smoke damage, it talks about the determination to close the building, it talks about remediation, how long they think that's going to take. And again, that's only like 6 lines and it's got all that information. What I want you to do is parse that information into what is something actionable that people actually need to know, as opposed to just giving them all that information and them not knowing what to do with it. Does that help?
So I think the question might be if some organizations directly serve community members, that really determines what kind of communication you're sending out versus something that serves at a higher level, right? And maybe that communication would be very, very different. So should we, for the purpose of the exercise and splitting into 2 groups, have the organization in question being a direct client service?
We'll show who's in group 1 and who's in group 2 if you split them out. I'm not sure.
Let's try it.
Let's try it. Let's have group 1 convey info if you wind up in group 1, and I'll pop in and tell you if you're in group 1 or group 2. Let's have group 1 convey information to the general public about what happened. Like, how are you going to let the media know so that they can put it in the newspaper, sort of thing. And then let's have group 2 figure out how you're going to let your clients know, like what, and then how is it that you outreach to your clients? How are you going to let your clients know, what they should do over, in this, it says it's going to take 2 days to complete. So this distribution site is going to be closed for 2 days. So what is that actionable information that clients need that's different from kind of, general public, or different from what staff needs?
All right. So if you haven't printed out the exercise, I would click on the link now in the main chat, and then you can download it to your computer from that Google Doc. All right, I'm gonna split out the groups now. All right, so Heather, they're all, can you see the breakout room box? It's just you and I now.
This, yeah.
Jacqueline, can you put your info in the chat?
Yeah, I'm doing that right now.
Perfect.
all of you have been put on mute by default by Zoom. So I'd like many of you to unmute so that we'll just kind of do some pop-up. And if I have to, I'll go around the room and ask. But let's go from now until 11:30 and then we'll take a break. I want to hear what some of the aha moments were in walking through this process and talking about how communications are built and who they're for, and what we, how we should. I'm not even going to try to finish that sentence. I think you know what I mean. So, and I'm going to start with Jacqueline because I had just finished hearing her with like for me, one of the real ahas.
So as I shared, I'm new to HIP housing and I was just put into the operations administrator role. And I've been tasked with the disaster plan as well as creating the IIPP. However, we have a lot of subsidiaries. So we serve clients with the home sharing program, self-sufficiency, as well as property management. So at this point, when I'm listening to everybody, I'm like, we don't have email addresses for everybody. We don't have a centralized email list, a centralized database. A lot of people don't have smartphones. Some people don't have internet. Property managers don't live on site. So I find it challenging, even when it was something as simple as asking everybody to get a parking plan, a parking permit, and creating that plan to get this done. There just really isn't one form of communication that's like a one size fits all because we serve such a diverse group of individuals. So that's kind of like my aha moment and kind of where I'm stuck.
Right.
Yeah. And Dina, I know, is going to connect with Jacqueline and give her lots of tips. Dina,
Absolutely.
I miss you in Oakland. I've been wondering, I live in Oakland part-time now, and I don't get notifications and things the way I used to. And now I know why.
I'll talk to Kyle and we'll see if I can't ramp him back up. But Jacqueline, I'll dig. I'm sure I probably have a lot of the stuff that we did with HIP housing back in the day. So yeah, we'll help you out with that. But yeah, the other aha for folks too is that you're exactly right. You have to have an internal and an external message, right? And you have to connect with 211 because you have to utilize all the tools and resources to get to the whole community. So that's always an aha for me because that's the biggest struggle. And even, being a seasoned or vintage, public information officer, whatever the term of the year is here. Everybody else is younger to me, so I call them the youngers. But they're much more savvy with social media and all those other things. So you have to just get the right people in the right places to help you because we can't do it alone. And the other thing I mentioned was if it's a regional impact, then we're going to have to listen to what we're deciding at the region and what we're pushing out information wise, because we want that to stay consistent. Or it might just be the county. So then the county would be pushing out that messaging. But all disasters are local. And so if nobody else is pushing out information, hey, it's up to us, right? So we have to remember that. And again, just remember the two sides. You're wanting to inform your staff, your collaborators and stakeholders and partnerships and liaisons that you work with internally, and then your external messaging to your clients, the public, and making sure that you include your electeds in that so they're in the know, and maybe giving them some talking points as well is always a really good idea to keep that consistency and help prevent the rumors.
Yeah, I lost my point, so I won't try to make it. But let's move in. I worked with group 2 and we walked through process. So I've been talking all morning. So it's somebody else's turn to talk about what we did. Marie, Jennifer, Joanna, Fred, we're all in my group. Michelle, did you guys, rock, paper, scissors and pick someone? Looks like maybe Michelle.
Yeah. Yeah. So we are with the Hillsborough Neighborhood Network, and we are putting on a small neighborhood community fair and called Neighbor Fest. And it was going to be at North Hills Park, but there was a small fire. So we're moving it to Vista Park. And we need to let the community who's like going to come to the fair know not to come to North Hills Park. So we decided we're not even going to tell them there was a fire, because we don't want them going and like looking and, like, oh, let me see, like, I want to see the firemen put out a fire or something. Like, we're not going to tell anybody anything. We just need to we need to send out two different like messages. One will send out an email to kind of the participants who are going to bring tables and like the bouncy houses and all the supplies, and let them know we're moving to Vista Park. And then we also need to send out a message to the public, the community. And so we're going to make a Facebook, we're going to update the Eventbrite to let them know, to give them the new address to Vista Park and some parking instructions. And that will generate like a email to anybody who registered. But we're also going to, we had like a Facebook group page. So we will make a post on the Facebook page, and we want to make maybe two different posts, just like a generic text post, but we also want to make a reel, and maybe have like the chair or the mayor, somebody like be in a video and explain that we're moving to the new park. And we'll, how there's like a banner at the top with the logo or something, we might like change the logo, and it's like NeighborFest, like now at Vista Park or something, so they see it right away when they go on the page.
Excellent. There's one more I'm just going to toss in there. Very good summary. We also talked about putting up some signage at Vista, at the first park, directing people to the second park, that it, that the
Yeah,
event
just in
has
case
moved.
someone shows up.
Yeah, because not everybody is going to go to Facebook to confirm in their, like, I would need my calendar invite updated, or I wouldn't know. So I live by my calendar.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is great. It's 11:30. Thank you all for just kind of walking through that and seeing that it is a little more complicated than we all think at first glance. And sitting here and using our frontal lobes to work on that means that when something actually happens, and it could be as simple as it's not simple though, but it could be, moving an event at the last minute from one place to another, is slightly more simple than, say, an earthquake that's affecting region-wide because, one of the bridges has been compromised or something. Like, I wish I could remember what I was going to say, just something Dina said about region-wide. I work with the Listos California campaign. And so I get years and years now of really realizing that the state does not actually understand, even if they say it out loud in their press releases, that all disasters are local. I don't know about you guys. A lot of times what I have to do is take information that goes from the state or from the regional level, or even from the county level, and digest it down for my actual audience. Like, for example, I don't need a page with 58 counties worth of links. It's just a link to maybe a web page, or 58 counties worth of places to go. I am at this particular moment in time off Whipple Avenue in Redwood City, California. And the thing I care most about here is we have one egress over the freeway for four major, humongous, multi-building apartment and condo complexes. And if something happens, we all have one egress over the freeway to get out of here. So that's the information that I want to know. No offense, couldn't care less what's happening in Sonoma. And so having all of that information handed to me is not useful. So being able to keep that information that we share hyper local, not just forwarding like Gavin Newsom is a great guy and he speaks in bullet points, which I really appreciate, but he's speaking at very high levels about high level things, and that planning has to happen, but it is not useful for me where I'm sitting right now. And on that, let's take a break. Come back at, I'm going to give you a tiny break. I'm terrible at time management this morning. Come back at 11. Can we just do like a 3-minute break, 3 or 4 minute break? You'll let me do that? Okay. Because I want to do a little bit with MOUs before noon. I don't know where the time went this morning. So come back in about 4 minutes, just before 11, but come back a little bit before 11:40. The group. We're going to now go through memorandums of understanding together as a group instead of breakout rooms, and talk about the highlights. In advance, I had sent you a worksheet, and I can drop that into the chat again. Thank you. If you didn't have it, someone, I can't remember who, couldn't see things in the Google Dropbox, so I'll make sure these go out again as attachments. I think they went out as attachments earlier, but we can make sure they go out again. So I'm gonna share my screen again. The right page. Let's see what my screen does again. Yes, it did that same thing where it went crazy. So, all right, in the land of making do with my technology today, hopefully you all can see the screen, and I've got a memorandum and I have a sample of the page up there. But I want to walk through this. Hopefully you will ask me some questions or slow my roll on this. A memorandum of understanding is like good fences for your neighbor on LinkedIn. It is organizations that you work with or partner with already, or that you might need to partner with in the future. But it's an opportunity to sit down and put some parameters around that relationship so there's no surprises afterwards. One of my favorite examples, which was learning the hard way, the American Red Cross works with facilities of all kinds in order to provide sheltering. And here in San Mateo, back many moons ago, we had floods. We called them the Redwood City floods. And we used one of the colleges to do sheltering. And they had just refinished their gymnasium floor. And we used blue painter's tape to tape tarps down to protect the floor. Pro tip, none of us knew this beforehand. Blue tape will eat fresh, like, what is that called? The finish on the floor. It eats it. And so we ended up having to replace and redo the whole entire floor after doing sheltering. It was a long shelter, but floors are expensive, like great big gymnasium floors. So that's my painfully expensive example of putting these things in place, because that was already the policy of the Red Cross to put things back the way we found them. But sometimes we don't think about that in advance. And then afterwards, there's some discussion of, just in terms of physical space, the door is now missing. Was the door missing before we got here and we're borrowing space from you? Or did we take the door down and lose it? Coming up with, who's going to pay for things and what are those parameters? What can we or can't we do? Like, just having that discussion in advance. It's making a good relationship so that it doesn't have to have any bad blood at the other end. The other important thing to remember, and why we call them memorandums of understanding instead of contracts, or maybe even partnerships, is because this isn't a legally binding document at the front end. Just because I agreed to work with you in a disaster or following a disaster doesn't mean I'm going to be in the capacity to actually do so. If my building fell down, then obviously I can't, which is kind of different than a contract, because some contracts are you are going to do this thing. And if you can't, if your building falls down, you have to find me another building. That's more contract language. This is just this is partnership language. This is, I'll help you if I can language. And when we develop these, for those of you that have the worksheet, who is it that you're working with? The physical, have a physical location, have all of the names and, have as much of those identifying details as you can, because whoever came up with or sat down, developed the MOU is not going to be the person who then is going to find it in a binder and say, oh my gosh, thankfully, we can also do food distribution down the street at this other place. Somebody did this in advance. And when you get there, they're not going to know who that person's going to be long gone too, which is another reason why you may not be able to utilize an MOU in the immediate aftermath of a disaster. And it's also a good reminder that you should revisit it once a year or so. Hey, can we still partner? You'll want to think about the purpose of it and kind of narrow that down. Make sure that you want to make sure that both sides have a really clear idea of what we're getting into here if we go into a partnership. You may have pre-existing agreements. You might already do something in partnership, and this is an addition. You might contract with them for something, and this would be an additional in case of disaster. And so that's another thing to clarify in an MOU. The responsibilities, commitments, or expectations. This is what I think I can provide. This is what you think you can provide. It's just getting some of that legwork done in advance. Again, contact information. The more contact information you can put in these, the better. I have looked at so many of these, and it's got like one person's signature. And I can't read your signature. I can't read my signature, and it's only gotten worse. So not knowing, I don't know who to talk to. It's super fun to call and be like, hi, we have a memorandum of understanding. Do you think maybe you could, Red Cross, do you think maybe we could shelter with you? We don't do sheltering. What are you talking about? So knowing who that person was. So again, determination, or when do we want to check on this again? And I talk about this from my experience in using them, which is in the Red Cross. But I was thinking when Dina was sharing at the very beginning about having nonprofits come in and help monitor the sandbag locations. That's something that could be formalized in an MOU. So that if Dina's on vacation, because I hear Dina wants to retire, but I don't know if she'll ever actually do it. So if Dina's not around, to remember the nonprofits that helped monitor the sandbag location, the next time I'm knocking on wood again, the next time this happens, then somebody else can say, oh, I've got this list. This is, in my appendix of this, my document in the red binder or wherever I've stored this information. I can reach out to those organizations, say, hey, you helped us out before. Could you help us out again? It can be a really great way to institutionalize relationships, but again, it's a relationship. So you want to revisit it, again, from time to time. This worksheet is not a template. And it's because you can, and I can show you examples if you really want to see them. There are MOUs that are 32 pages long, and they're full of legalese, and lawyers have looked at them. And then there are the handshakes where I met you and we agreed, and maybe we actually exchanged a physical business card, but mostly what we did is we put each other's phone number in our phone, and it's very informal. And they run the gamut between that. And so what I'm offering is something that is somewhat flexible, gives you like those major points that you might want to hit, but that you can type up on a page or 2 pages. Again, depending on what the financial implications are of partnering. There might be lawyers that want to get involved. It might get to be more pages, but if it really is something as simple as, you sent staff up to help us out on something before, and we'd like to institutionalize that knowledge and remember to call you again and have the opportunity to call on you again if you think you can help out. But it's not a contract, it's not a requirement. So again, could be a page long, it could be a note in an email box somewhere, it could be 32-page long document. Hopefully having that worksheet can help you out with moving forward from that. How do you figure out who those organizations are? My experience is usually you figure out a disaster and then you just want to grab onto them after the fact, and try to hang on to that information for future knowledge. And I'm sorry we didn't get to work on one of those. I had terrible time planning today, which sometimes happens. So, and I'm not taking a break. I do want to talk about some resources for staff training. You can get on lots of email lists for this. It can drive you crazy. Like I said at the beginning, I'm going to add you to my list, which is these classes and then other organizations locally, as I know, that offer things that I think are of interest at the nonprofit level. I add those trainings, and I can also, I can hook you up. If you're interested in the kind of training that CERT would train, I don't publish the CERT training schedules, but if you find me, I can figure out where your local CERT is and I can connect you with them.
Just call me.
Or I can just call, or you can just skip me and call Dina.
If you're in Burlingame, Millbrae, or Hillsborough, we got you. Otherwise, San Mateo Consolidated. Well, we have the National CERT Conference coming up too, June 26th to July 1st.
Oh, absolutely plug that. Because we're doing a series of trainings there. And
yes,
I just heard that we're doing pre-conference trainings, and I just heard they're going to open up pre-conference. You don't have to register for the pre-conference at the very end. So you'll be able to do those as free trainings.
Right. And if you have a CERT team or something, you want to get together a team to actually do the stations and whatnot, we're going to have exercise competition Monday afternoon, as well as Tuesday and Wednesday. We'll have a morning and afternoon sessions so people can go through and compete and do those skill stations. It's going to be a lot of fun. There's prizes. If you, I'll grab the National CERT thing here and drop it in the chat for you guys. The first 150 that register for that exercise actually will get a Pro Pack Pack 6, which is a really nice pack. So yeah, looking forward to that.
Yeah, that is the last week of June. And that actually, because we'll be doing trainings there, that will end up in my next newsletter. Probably should have wound up in this one, but I'm not sure if I remembered. But these are just some of the places that you can start to find more training for staff and more information. Your local co-ed or VOED can help you out. You're here thanks to your local co-ed. The UWASI, again, we are a contractor for classes that UWASI pays for our time and expertise, so that you can take those classes for free. We do classes, cadre. There are others, but this is just kind of local San Mateo along the peninsula. Reach out to me. We can help. In particular, if you have something specific you want to do, something like this just for your staff, maybe not just like this, but if you want to do something that works with your staff, we can do that. FEMA classes, if you're not signed up for FEMA classes, they can be a little high level and they can be a little complicated to sign up. You know how I said I'm an email away? If you try to sign up for FEMA and you can't figure it out, reach out to me. I'll help you figure out how to sign up for FEMA classes. They do a lot online and they put a lot more online with COVID. And then often, and EMI is one of their big trainers. They'll come out from time to time. And I often, if it's something that's relevant, I won't ever bother you guys with underwater search and rescue classes, because I'm pretty sure that nobody who attends my classes on nonprofit continuity of operation is actually also a firefighter in need of underwater search and rescue. I kind of discourage them from showing up here because they have other classes for them and it isn't as relevant for them.
Only if you're a swimmer.
Use a pool. So I also want to encourage us, particularly if we're, I mean, it's good to have even if you're at home, but particularly when we work in facilities, we work with the general public, having staff, having people around with first aid, AED, and CPR certification. I don't teach those. Those are always done by little for-profit classes for certification. The Red Cross, and this is old information, the Red Cross used to do them without certification. So they were much more inexpensive because you didn't get a little fancy card. And then I like to throw in Narcan training because they're making that more accessible. And it's one of those things that, like first aid or CPR, you just don't know if you need it when you need it. So again, you'll get on my newsletter. And you're always free to ask me. I'm very good at connecting people with things. We're going to pop up a survey. We're going to pop up a poll right now. And I'm going to ask you to go through and answer these questions. This is about funding. Our funder really likes it when I take these numbers and then I divide them by how many people took the poll and I give them they really like these numbers. When you leave, 3 questions are going to pop up. If you could take a second and answer those, they're going to ask you, what did you get out of this course? What could be done better? I mean, I have a huge long list myself. And then there's one, what other classes would you like to take? That's what I am really interested in. I do read feedback. And I use those, what other classes are people interested in, to work with UASI and other funders to make sure that I can get training free to the public so that you don't have to, you don't have to come and try and pay for this privately. There's a whole industry that does that. So thank you for that. You'll get these slides next Tuesday, disaster management or incident command system. You'll have the link to this. I have a short URL. I'm not sure why that one is the one that wound up on this particular slide. But we're going to talk about how to manage our staff and clients in an emergency for that, and talk to Anna about earthquake safety kits. All the links work in the slides when I send them. And then next June, I think there is a registration, but I didn't have the link for it. So you got to save the date in the slide deck today, but we'll make sure that you get the link for that. And this is going to be nonprofits and members of emergency management and the government doing like a panel discussion about we'll probably focus on the winter storms, but how they collaborate and communicate during a disaster. And that is Anna. And that is me. And I think this is thank you. So I will stop sharing that. All right, there. Thank you all for attending. I've lost my mouse. Anna, did you have anything else?
No, just that I put the link to the next training in the chat. We do have a registration page open, and that will be in person at County Center in Redwood City. And we'll have food, so it'll be more interactive. Please sign up for that June 8th.
If you feed us, we will be there.
Okay. It'll be good. It'll be good snacks too. We'll make sure of it. All right, everyone.
All
Thank
right.
you.